Aventurine, a character whose whole motif is around deception and gambling. Could there be a more perfect character for a gacha game? And after that 2.1 story, how could you not like this guy? Aventurine makes his playable debut in the second half of version 2.1, and he is an imaginary preservation character that provides shields to teammates that can stack, which is not the norm for shields, and he also has a hint of nihility, being able to increase the crit damage received on an enemy, and he also has a follow-up attack mechanic. So, in this video, I will deep dive into his kit, give you some relic options, talk about potential light cones, and overall just try to give you guys a better idea on how he's going to function as a sustain. So let's go ahead and get started. This is the first character in the game that has a basic attack that scales off of the defense stat. Even though Fu Xuan was a limited preservation character, she scaled mainly off of HP, and that's what her basic attack scales off of. So Aventurine is our first defense scaling character in the game. Characters even like Gepard and Fire Trailblazer did not scale their damage off of defense. Now let's move on to the meat and potatoes, starting with his skill, Cornerstone Deluxe. It's a defensive skill. It will provide a shield called Fortified Wager to all allies. This will block damage equal to 24% of Aventurine's defense, plus 320 for 3 turns. This is at talent level 10. And then when Fortified Wager is gained repeatedly, the shield can stack up to a maximum amount of 200% of the shield provided by the original effect of the skill. So if we take an Aventurine with 4,000 defense, he can provide a shield that blocks about 1,300 damage. That might not seem like a lot, but he's able to stack the shield, like I just mentioned, which no other shield from a character's kit can do so. So at 200% power, he can block 2,600 damage for every party member. 2,600 shield is a pretty beefy shield. Also, he does not completely rely only on his skill to apply a shield. His shield is also applied from his follow-up attack mechanic, which makes him a bit more fluid in providing the team with sustainability. Moving on to his ultimate, Roulette Shark. This is a single target damaging ultimate that only requires 110 energy. When he uses the ultimate, he will randomly gain 1 to 7 points of Blind Bet. And Blind Bet is just his mechanic in order for him to unleash his follow-up attack. We'll talk a little bit more about how that works in his talent section. His ultimate is also going to inflict Unnerved onto a single enemy for 3 turns. And then he deals imaginary damage equal to 270% of his defense to a single target enemy. So that's some pretty decent scaling. And Aventurine is going to have a lot of defense, so the damage potential for this ultimate is pretty good. And then what Unnerved does is that it will increase the damage dealt to that enemy target by 15%. And this does indeed count as a debuff, which helps characters like Dr. Ratio and Acheron, which makes him a really good sustain partner for those 2 units specifically. This move also does 90 points of weakness break, which is quite a lot. And so if we take that 4,000 defense Aventurine that I was mentioning earlier, and if he has a signature Lightcone, with all of the buffs and debuffs applied, he can deal about 20,000 damage with his ult solo. So for a preservation character, that's pretty good. So the purpose of Aventurine's ultimate is to increase the damage that your teammates deal to a single target enemy, as well as helps him to accelerate his talent to use his follow-up attack. So let's go ahead and move on to his talent, which is Shot Loaded Right. And the talent is a bounce attack, among other things. So firstly, for any ally that has the Fortified Wager shield, their effect res increases by 50%. And then when they get attacked, Aventurine gains 1 point of Blind Bet. That effect res increase is pretty good. Effect res, I think people are realizing now, is a really good stat to have because more and more enemies in the game are starting to have CC and dot mechanics, and those can really, really hurt you during a fight. Additionally, when Aventurine has Fortified Wager, he can outright just resist CC debuffs, crowd control debuffs. It can only work 1 time every 2 turns, so essentially just has a 2-turn cooldown whenever he resists a CC debuff. Also, Aventurine will gain 1 extra point of Blind Bet if he gets attacked, so essentially he gains 2 points of Blind Bet if he gets attacked. So for example, if your team is hit by an AoE attack, he'll gain 5 points of blind bet instead of 4. And then once he reaches 7 points of blind bet, he will consume 7 points and then launch a 7-hit follow-up attack. Each hit deals imaginary damage equal to 25% of Aventurine's defense to a single random enemy. So again, this is a bounce type attack, so that attack just bounces 7 times among random enemies. And if there's just one enemy, then the damage scaling is 175% damage scaling. Blind bet also caps at 10, so if you happen to go above 7, he just consumes the 7 and you'll be left over with however many blind bet was left over from the consumed 7. Now, 7 points of blind bet might seem like a lot because your team has to get attacked 7 times, but in matchups where there's AoE and also combining your ultimate, you're going to be unleashing his follow-up attack more often than you actually think. He also has a trace that also helps gain more blind bet points. The weakness break on this move is also 10 points, so if all 7 hits attacks one enemy, you are dealing 70 points of weakness break to them, which is pretty decent. Now moving on to his technique, the red or the black. It's a defensive technique where he will provide the team with one of 3 defense buffs. It will either increase the team's defense by 24%, 36%, or 60%. The higher the defense increase, the lower the chance for it to happen. But if you really want to, you can use this technique multiple times to fish for the maximum amount of defense. And as a quality of life, if you happen to roll the highest defense, but then you roll again, and if it was lower, then you will retain the highest amount of defense buff. This effect also lasts for 3 turns. Now let's go ahead and move on to his trace. His first one is Bingo. After an ally with Fortified Wager, which is his shield, launches a follow-up attack, Aventurine accumulates 1 blind bet point. This effect can trigger up to 3 times, and that trigger count resets at the start of Aventurine's turn. So this means that pairing up Aventurine with follow-up attacks just allows himself to apply more shields and also more follow-up attacks himself. Additionally, when Aventurine launches his talent's follow-up attack, he will provide all allies with a smaller Fortified Wager shield that can block damage equal to 7% of Aventurine's defense plus 96, and then also the ally with the lowest shield will additionally gain that same amount of shield, 7%, and then plus an extra 96 of his defense. So essentially, the ally with the lowest shield gets double the amount of shield that he gave to all of the other teammates. So with about 4,000 defense, that small shield is giving about 384 points, and double that is about 768. His next trace is Hot Hand. When the battle starts, it will grant all allies a Fortified Wager shield, whose shield effect is equal to that of his skill, which lasts 3 turns. This is super nice so that you don't have to spend the skill point at the beginning of the fight, and you could just have Aventurine generate skill points. Although you still have the option, if you want to, you can still use his skill so that you get the maximum shield effect. Because remember that he can stack his shield up to 200% of its original value. So basically, Aventurine just has options, and options are always good. His last trace, Leverage, for every 100 of Aventurine's defense that exceeds 1600, increases his own crit rate by 2% up to a maximum increase of 48%. So this means in order to maximize this, we need an extra 2400 defense, which means that we need 4000 defense to max out this trace to get an extra 48% crit. And 48% crit rate is a ton. So if you max this out, you'll probably want to be looking for substats with crit damage so that you can just deal more damage with Aventurine. You can even decide to run more of a DPS hybrid Aventurine and run crit damage on your body instead of, say, some like defense. So the way that Aventurine's kit works just gives him so many different ways to build him. Just depends on what role you really want Aventurine to fulfill. Next are his minor traces. He gets an extra 35% defense, 14.4% imaginary damage boost, and 10% effect res. And so let's go ahead and move on to his relics. And like I just mentioned really briefly a little bit earlier, he's pretty fluid with his builds, especially his relic build. Depends on what you want Aventurine's role to be. If you want damage, you can go for a 2-piece Ash Blazing set for that extra follow-up attack damage. If you want some extra speed, you can go for a 2-piece Hacker Space. Definitely don't run 4-piece because his ultimate doesn't apply to allies, so it's not going to activate the set effect. And then if you want more defense for just more beefier shields, you can go for Knight of Purity or the Belobog Planar Ornament set. Just remember that he only needs 4,000 defense to maximize his crit rate trace. So if you can maintain that 4k defense without defense relic sets, you can start investing more into speed or follow-up attack damage or just imaginary damage in general. So you could also consider something like Wastelander of Banditry, just for more imaginary damage and more crit rate and crit damage on him. And then other options aside from the Belobog for more defense, you can go with Inert Salsodo to increase his follow-up attack and ultimate damage because those are both important parts of his kit. Or you can go for Broken Keel to be more a support set to increase all allies crit damage, because in his kit he is increasing effect res, so you can easily activate the effect of Broken Keel without needing any effect res substats. And then in terms of the main stats, again, he's really fluid. If you want him to deal more damage, you can go crit damage on the body piece, or you can go defense if you want more beefier shields. For the feat, I would definitely recommend speed to help him be a better SP point generator, and also in general just to make him faster than the enemy so that you can apply shields before your enemy moves. And then for the Planar Ornament set, for the Orb, defense, or even imaginary damage bonus depending on if you can hit that 4k defense. And then for the Link Robe, I would probably definitely go defense there. So if you happen to find substats and defense on your other pieces, and if you're able to hit that 4k again, then you can just mess around with his relics and not feel the need to go all in on defense with all relics. For reference, it is totally possible to hit around 4k defense if only 2 of your relic pieces are a defense main stat. So this means that you can go either crit damage, speed, or imaginary damage bonus on the other 2 pieces. And let's say you decide to go all in on defense main stats. The difference between, let's say, a 4,000 defense Aventurine and a 5,500 defense Aventurine, the amount of shield that you're providing is 1,300 for a 4,000 defense and 1,650 for a 5,500 defense. So if about 350 extra shield points is worth it for you in that case, then by all means go for it. But if that extra 350 points does not mean that much to you and you'd rather invest more into damage or speed, then all the power to you. It would be my personal recommendation to just need to hit around that 4k mark and then start investing into damage and speed. Now let's talk his Lightcone options, because it's the same kind of story. His Lightcone options depend on what type of utility you want him to provide for the team, and if you just need more defense to reach that 4k minimum to maximize his trace. So starting with Moment of Victory, which is Gepard's signature Lightcone, it's pretty good, it's decent, although the effect hit rate doesn't matter. The Lightcone itself just provides an enormous amount of extra defense. So if you want really good sustain, then this Lightcone is really good. His signature is definitely going to be his go-to just because it synergizes perfectly with his kit. I won't go into too much detail on what his Lightcone does. However, at a very high level, it's going to increase his defense and also crit damage, and then also increases the damage received by an enemy. The next one is Day 1 of My New Life, which provides some extra defense if you need help reaching that 4k. Otherwise, the all-type res resistance increase is just an okay effect to help with sustaining your team. Landau's Choice, I think, is a pretty underrated Lightcone because it reduces his own damage taken, and it also allows him to be attacked more often, even though he already is a preservation character, which means his aggro value is higher than typical. If you make it even higher, then it just increases his chances to get attacked more often. And remember that he gets 2 points of blind bet if he gets attacked. Trend of the Universal Market. This is a Lightcone you should use if you are planning to use Aventurine with Acheron, because the burn passive effect will help Acheron get stacks for her ultimate. This is me, a pretty good Lightcone if you're looking to improve his single target ultimate damage, increasing it by 120% of his defense, so pretty decent increase to damage. The next one is Destiny's Threads Forewoven. It will increase his effect res by 20%, which if you're going to be going the heal route, combine that with the 50% from his trace already, he's hitting 70% effect res, so he's definitely resisting those effects. And then for every 100 defense the wearer has, it will increase their damage by 1.2 up to 48%. So you can easily max this out for some extra damage. Consort for 2, it's a solid Lightcone that boosts defense and damage. This Lightcone at S5 will increase the wearer's damage by 8% for every on-field character that has a shield, and since Aventurine's skill provides a shield for everyone on the team, easily maxable. And then, being a sustained character, he can honestly sustain any team, so he's going to fit into any kind of team that you need him for. Really just pay attention to the weakness types, and if he helps out with that, then he's going to be a good choice to bring into that matchup. But additionally, he is going to synergize a little bit better with a follow-up attack team because it allows him to get more points of blind bet. He also applies a debuff, which helps Acheron get stacks, so there is a little bit of extra synergy there. So characters like Dr. Ratio, since he's a follow-up attack character and he needs debuffs, he really likes Aventurine, but Aventurine doesn't really need Dr. Ratio. Aventurine can function with anybody. Aventurine's also going to be really good if you bring him into matchups where they deal a lot of AoE damage, so definitely consider that. This just allows him to get more points of blind bet, allowing him to output more damage, as well as just giving the team more shields. Anyway guys, that's all that I have for you in this video today. Let me know what you guys think of Aventurine. Are you guys super excited for him? How many pulls do you have ready for this guy? And until next time, I will see you in the next one.